They called her a burden for being in debt until the rich cowboy handed her the title to his land. Dry Creek, Wyoming Territory, autumn 1883. The breeze bore the aroma of grit and haze along the lone central avenue of Dry Creek, while chapel chimes announced midday. Local residents clustered like ravens by the timber barrier at the rear of the horse barn, murmuring, mocking, gesturing. Some gripped sunshades. Others pulled their youngsters nearer as if the scene ahead could taint purity. Anna Whitlow positioned herself with her arms restrained at her back, fastened to a cracked wooden stake as if she were livestock up for bidding. Her gown was bleached, weathered by the rays, and one part of her face displayed the streak of crusted blood from where she'd tumbled before, attempting to evade the unavoidable. "She's a Whitlow through and through, just like her pa, sinking in obligations and pulling folks under with her," grumbled a lady in a plumed bonnet. "Ought to have fled the place when the lender seized her dwelling," declared another boldly enough for Anna to catch. She didn't wince. Her emerald gaze remained ahead, locked on emptiness, striving not to wink, since each time she did, her father's visage emerged, pallid and azure in the burial box they couldn't finance. 2 months departed now, and yet he confined her in manners he never intended. The lender, Mr. Hollis, reclined against a pillar close by with a cloth dabbed to his damp throat. "This is merely commerce," he informed the modest, sanctimonious assembly. Her pa was in arrears $43 beyond what the disposal yielded. That renders her accountable. "She doesn't possess 43 pennies," a voice yelled. Chuckles. Anna's mouth remained sealed tight. She'd argued her situation the prior day and the one preceding that, explained she possessed no kin remaining, no funds, no shelter, but none of it counted. The statute declared an unsettled liability was one passed down, and in Dry Creek statutes flexed for the influential and shattered the frail. "She can labor it away," Hollis went on, gesturing toward 2 fellows in hide jerkins. "Domestic servant in Denver. Perhaps additional if the purchaser desires it." One of the fellows blinked slyly. Anna closed her lids only once, and a lone droplet traced down her face. The heavens overhead lacked any vapors, but the sunlight seemed harsh, vivid, and observing. A steed neighed far off. Then the gradual, steady clop of hooves intensified against the compacted soil. Faces pivoted. Quietude swept over the throng like a wave. From the northern tip of the road came a gentleman clad in a rich chestnut overcoat. His broad-rimmed headgear dipped low across his brow. Trailing him was a flatbed cart bearing 3 youngsters, 2 lads, and a small girl no more than 6, her features partly concealed in a cap. He alighted deliberately, securing his mount to the post without uttering a sound. The outsider gazed at Anna, not the gathering, not the lender, solely Anna. She raised her head. An element within her bosom altered. His gaze held the hue of scorched honey, seasoned, compassionate, yet inscrutable. "Is this how Dry Creek handles its ladies these days?" the man inquired, tone subdued but resolute. "She's not a woman, she's a burden," Hollis replied. "Rewrite this story part without changing its style, tone, and characters, just change the wording also. Same its start. And ending, and also give it to me long that story part is, and always remember that for future story parts, here is the story part, they called her a burden for being in debt until the rich. Cowboy handed her the title to his land. Dry Creek, Wyoming Territory, autumn 1883. The wind carried the scent of dust and smoke through the single main street of Dry Creek as church bells tolled the noon hour. Townsfolk gathered like crows near the wooden fence behind the livery stable, whispering, scoffing, pointing. Some held parasols. Others clutched their children closer, as if the sight before them might contaminate innocence. Anna Whitlow stood with her wrists bound behind her, tied to a split log fence post as though she were an animal for auction. Her dress was faded, sun-worn, and one side of her cheek bore the smear of dry blood where she had fallen earlier, trying to escape the inevitable. "She's a Whitlow, all right, just like her daddy, drowning in debt and dragging everyone down with her," muttered a woman in a feathered hat. "Should have left town when the bank took her house," said another loud enough for Anna to hear. She didn't flinch. Her green eyes stayed forward, fixed on nothing, trying not to blink, because every time she did, her father's face appeared, cold and blue in the coffin they couldn't afford. 2 months gone now, and still he held her captive in ways he never meant to. The banker, Mr. Hollis, leaned against a post nearby with a handkerchief pressed to his sweetie neck. "This is just business," he told the small, self-righteous crowd. "Her daddy owed $43 more than the sale brought in." "That means she's liable. She ain't got 43 cents, someone called. Laughter. Anna's lips stayed pressed shut. She'd pleaded her case yesterday and the day before that told them she'd no family left, no money, no home, but none of it mattered. The law said a debt unpaid was a debt inherited, and in Dry Creek, laws bent for the powerful and broke the weak. "She can work it off," Hollis continued, nodding toward 2 men in leather vests. "House made in Denver. Maybe more if the buyer wants it." One of the men winked. Anna shut her eyes just once, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. The sky above held no clouds, but the sun felt cruel, bright, and watching. A horse whinnied in the distance. Then the slow, measured sound of hooves grew louder against the hard-packed earth. Heads turned. Silence rolled through the crowd like a tide. From the north end of the street rode a man dressed in a deep brown duster, his wide-brimmed hat low over his eyes. Behind him followed a buckboard wagon carrying 3 children, 2 boys and a little girl no older than 6, her face half hidden in a bonnet. He dismounted slowly, tying his res to the hitch without a word. The stranger looked at Anna, not the crowd, not the banker, just Anna. She looked up. Something in her chest shifted. His eyes were the color of burnt amber, weathered, kind, but unreadable. "Is this how Dry Creek treats its women now?" the man asked, voice quiet but firm. "She's not a woman. She's a burden," Hollis replied. "Grok 40709, hey. It looks like the story part in your message is empty, just quotes with nothing inside. If you meant to provide a story for me to rewrite, could you share it? I'd be happy to handle it following the same rules as before. Rewrite this story part without changing its style tone, and characters just change the wording also, same its start. And ending, and also give it to me long that story part is, and always remember that for future story parts here is the story. Part Grok 40709, they laughed when he bought the abandoned barn for $1 until they saw the chains in the basement. Red Hollow, Texas, spring, 1885. The heavens above Red Hollow bore the shade of aged metal, muted and marred. Grime lingered close over the level prairies, and the breeze howled amid slanting barriers as if it recalled a dreadful event. On the veranda of the lawman's headquarters, a cluster of fellows guffawed fiercely enough to hack. He shelled out an entire buck for that thing. One of them bellowed. Laughter erupted like shots from a revolver. Wes Callahan didn't glance rearward. He had no reason to. He'd encountered that sort of mockery previously. In military garb, in taverns, in his very own mind. The variety that implied you were either overly bold or too shattered to be comprehended. A barn, that formed the punchline. A forsaken, rodent-gnawed, partially crumbled barn on the southern fringe of the settlement. It hadn't housed anything except gloom for 3 years, not since the prior proprietor headed westward and failed to return. It tilted askew as though it harbored mysteries within its framework. He acquired it for $1 during the bidding. The gavel struck and the locals scoffed. But Wes didn't purchase it for livestock or crops. He obtained it because it seemed like the sole spot in Red Hollow that wasn't putting on airs, and because an element of it, something hushed, had pulled him toward it. The outer door shrieked as he pulled it open. Sunlight sliced through cracks in the warped walls, catching dust in the air like smoke. Rewrite this story part without. Changing its style, tone, and characters, just change the wording also. Same its start. And ending, and also give it to me long that story part is, and always remember that for future story parts, here is the story part. They laughed. When he bought the abandoned barn for $1 until they saw the chains in the basement. Red Hollow, Texas, spring, 1885. The sky over Red Hollow was the color of old tin, dull and bruised. Dust hung low across the flatlands, and the wind whistled through leaning fences like it remembered something terrible. On the porch of the sheriff's office, a group of men laughed hard enough to cough. "He paid a whole $1 for it," one of them shouted. Hotter followed like gunfire. Wes Callahan didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd heard that kind of laugh before. In uniform, in bars, in his own damn head. The kind that said, you were either too brave or too broken to be understood. A barn. That was the joke. An abandoned rat-eaten, half-collapsed barn on the south edge of town. It hadn't stored anything but shadows in 3 years, ever since the previous owner rode west and never came back. It leaned crooked like it had secrets in its bones. He bought it for $1 at auction. The hammer dropped and the town snorted, but Wes didn't buy it for animals or grain. He bought it because it felt like the only place in Red Hollow that wasn't pretending, and because something about it, something quiet, had drawn him in. They called her a burden for being in debt until the rich cowboy handed her the title to his land. Dry Creek, Wyoming Territory, autumn 1883. The breeze bore the aroma of grit and haze along the lone central avenue of Dry Creek while chapel chimes announced midday. Local residents clustered like ravens by the timber barrier at the rear of the horse barn, murmuring, mocking, gesturing. Some gripped sunshades. Others pulled their youngsters nearer, as if the scene ahead could taint purity. Anna Whitlow positioned herself with her arms restrained at her back, fastened to a cracked wooden stake as if she were livestock up for bidding. Her gown was bleached, weathered by the rays, and one part of her face displayed the streak of crusted blood from where she'd tumbled before, attempting to evade the unavoidable. She's a Whitlow through and through, just like her pa, sinking in obligations and pulling folks under with her, grumbled a lady in a plumed bonnet. Ought to have fled the place when the lender seized her dwelling, declared another boldly enough for Anna to catch. She didn't wince. Her emerald gaze remained ahead, locked on emptiness, striving not to wink, since each time she did, her father's visage emerged, pallid and azure in the burial box they couldn't finance. 2 months departed now, and yet he confined her in manners he never intended. The lender, Mr. Hollis, reclined against a pillar close by with a cloth dabbed to his damp throat. "This is merely commerce," he informed the modest, sanctimonious assembly. Her pa was in arrears $43 beyond what the disposal yielded. That renders her accountable. "She doesn't possess 43 pennies, a voice yelled. Chuckles. Anna's mouth remained sealed tight. She'd argued her situation the prior day and the one preceding that, explained she possessed no kin remaining, no funds, no shelter, but none of it counted. The statute declared an unsettled liability was one passed down, and in Dry Creek statutes flexed for the influential and shattered the frail. "She can labor it away," Hollis went on, gesturing toward 2 fellows in hide jerkins. "Domestic servant in Denver. Perhaps additional if the purchaser desires it." One of the fellows blinked slyly. Anna closed her lids only once, and a lone droplet traced down her face. The heavens overhead lacked any vapors, but the sunlight seemed harsh, vivid, and observing. A steed neighed far off. Then the gradual, steady clop of hooves intensified against the compacted soil. Faces pivoted. Quietude swept over the throng like a wave. From the northern tip of the road came a gentleman clad in a rich chestnut overcoat. His broad-rimmed headgear dipped low across his brow. Trailing him was a flatbed cart bearing 3 youngsters, 2 lads, and a small girl no more than 6, her features partly concealed in a cap. He alighted deliberately, securing his mount to the post without uttering a sound. The outsider gazed at Anna. Not the gathering, not the lender, solely Anna. She raised her head. An element within her bosom altered. His gaze held the hue of scorched honey, seasoned, compassionate, yet inscrutable. "Is this how Dry Creek handles its ladies these days?" the man inquired, tone subdued but resolute. "She's not a woman, she's a burden," Hollis replied. "And she owes." The stranger cut him off. "How much?" $43.12. He reached inside his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, counted each coin, deliberate and silent, like every clink of silver was a sentence in a language only he spoke. He handed the money to Hollis. "She does not owe you any more." Whispers rippled. Hollis hesitated, then took the pouch and stepped back. The man turned to Anna, pulled a small knife from his belt, and with a swift motion, cut the rope binding her wrists. Her arms fell forward, weak and trembling. She met his gaze, confused, vulnerable, silent. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her throat burned with unspoken gratitude. He stepped aside. "Come with me. You have a place now." One of the boys in the wagon shouted, "Papa, who is she?" The stranger looked at Anna, then back at his children. "Someone who needed help, that's all." As Anna climbed into the wagon, hands shaking, heart racing, the little girl offered her a piece of apple. Anna took it with a nod, tears welling, but refusing to fall. The wagon pulled away, dust rising behind them. The crowd slowly dispersed, some ashamed, others silent, a few still scowling. But the air had shifted. Something new had entered Dry Creek, and this story, her story, had just begun. If this moment struck a chord, tap the hype button and stay with us. The road ahead is long, wild, and full of heart. The wagon creaked over a ridge and down into the valley, where the Callahan Ranch stretched like a living painting, golden grass swaying in the wind, pine trees lining the edge of the distant hills, and a wide red barn that glowed in the sinking sun. Anna sat stiffly in the back beside the children. Her wrists were rubbed raw from the ropes, and her mind ached more than her body. The girl who had offered her an apple now leaned against her shoulder without a word, her tiny fingers playing with the hem of Anna's sleeve. The two boys sat across from her, casting glances, whispering. "She doesn't look dangerous," one muttered. "He looks like she cries a lot," said the other. "She's sad," the girl replied, almost like a defense. The wagon came to a stop in front of a modest two-story ranch house. A ranch hand carrying a saddle froze at the sight of Anna. Another woman stepped out from the kitchen door, apron on, wiping her hands. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that the girl from town? Thought they were selling her off. Why is Jacob bringing her here?" Anna stayed in the wagon until Jacob returned from tying the horses. He offered her a hand. She hesitated before taking it. His grip was strong but careful, like everything he did was measured. Inside the house, the scent of stew filled the warm air. The hearth crackled. A ticking clock echoed in the stillness. Jacob led her to a chair at the long wooden table. "You can stay here," he said simply. "You'll have food, a place to sleep. I don't expect anything in return." Anna looked down at her hands, voice barely a whisper. "But I owe you." Jacob shook his head. "No, you do not. Debt's paid." "That was my father's," she said. "Now it feels like I owed twice over." His eyes met hers across the room, calm, unwavering. "What your father left behind isn't your burden to carry anymore." Before she could reply, one of the boys called out from the stairwell, "Papa, is she staying forever?" Jacob turned, his voice flat but not unkind. "She's staying as long as she wants." That night, Anna was given the guest room, small but clean, with a quilted blanket and a view of the hills. She stood by the window long after the oil lamp was lit, watching the dusk settle over the land. The walls were quiet, peaceful, yet she could feel the weight of her presence in every creak of the floorboards. Outside, ranch hands loaded feet into the barn. One paused, nodding toward the house. "Boss gone soft," he said. "Bringing home strays now." "They say she's a debtor's girl," another whispered. "Nothing but trouble." Inside, Anna heard none of it. But she felt every word in her bones, the way people looked, the space she took up. Downstairs, Jacob sat at the table with his children. The girl spoke between bites of bread. She was crying in her sleep. "She's not our mother," one of the boys said, defensive. "She's not trying to be," Jacob replied. "Let her rest." He said nothing more, only sipped his coffee and stared into the fire like it held answers he was not ready to speak aloud. Upstairs, Anna lay awake, the warmth of the quilt doing little to settle her thoughts. Her stomach was full, her hands clean, her body safe for no. But her heart, it felt tethered to something she could not name. She did not understand this man, this quiet rancher with storm-colored eyes, who stepped into her life like a miracle and asked for nothing in return. That somehow frightened her more than debt ever had. The days began to stretch like canvas under the Wyoming sun, bright, slow, and unfamiliar. Anna woke early each morning to the lowing of cattle and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. At first she stayed quiet, unsure where to step, what she was allowed to touch. But soon she found herself moving through the house like a shadow that chose to remain. She began to cook breakfast before the children came down, biscuits and eggs, sometimes beans with bacon if the pantry allowed. She swept floors, laundered linens, and stitched torn shirts by firelight. When Jacob went out to the fields, she followed, offering to carry feed or help mend fences. He never asked her to do more than she could, but she always tried anyway. The children tested her. The boys swapped the sugar with salt once and laughed until their ribs ached. The girl hid Anna's boots in the hoft. They whispered behind her back and giggled when she bent to stir the pot. It was not cruelty. It was curiosity wrapped in doubt. But Anna did not scold. She laughed gently even when it hurt. She told stories while washing their hair. She listened when they fought, knelt when they cried, and stitched buttons on their shirts without being asked. Over time, their pranks faded. The laughter stayed. Jacob said little, but he saw everything. When she tripped, trying to lift a water bucket twice her weight, he took it from her hands without a word and carried it to the trough. When the first frost bit there and she stood outside tending laundry, he walked past her once and again, and on the third pass he laid his coat over her shoulders without breaking stride. He never looked back to see her reaction. He did not need to. Anna's heart was still weary, but it softened like snow thawing beneath the sun. She smiled more, slept deeper. Her hands grew calloused. Her cheeks took on color, and her voice, once barely above a whisper, now sang softly as she peeled apples by the window. Then came the night that changed everything. The moon hung thin and high, veiled by clouds. Jacob was out late checking the southern fence. The children were asleep. Anna sat by the hearth, darning a shirt, when the dogs began to bark. Voices, footsteps, then a gun cock. She moved quickly, quiet as a doe. Through the side window, she saw 3 figures, bandits, rough and dirty, creeping toward the barn. She grabbed Jacob's rifle from the wall, though she had never fired one. She barely made it outside when she saw a movement by the corral. One of the boys, Ben, had slipped out to see what the noise was. A bandit caught sight of him. "Just a no," she cried. Ben froze. The man lunged, reaching for the boy. Anna raised the rifle. Her hand shook violently. She could not aim, so she ran. She threw herself between the outlaw and the boy, screaming as loud as her lungs would allow. The man grabbed her by the arm and shoved her down, but by then Jacob's horse thundered across the yard. A shot rang out. The bandits scattered like rats under torchlight. One limped, another fired blindly, but Jacob was faster, more precise. He took down 2 before the third vanished into the trees. Anna lay in the dirt, blood on her lip, arm bruised, trembling with fear and adrenaline. Jacob jumped down beside her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "The boy Ben, he's safe." Ben knelt beside them, eyes wide, voice small. "She saved me, Pa." Jacob's gaze flicked between them, then to her. He helped her up slowly. His hands were warm. That night, everything shifted again. The next morning, Ben refused to leave Anna's side. The girl braided a flower into Anna's hair. Even the older boy, Sam, began calling her by name instead of her. And Jacob? He still said little, but when he looked at Anna across the table that morning, something new had settled in his eyes. Not charity, not pity, respect. The days lengthened into spring, and with the soft wind came something harder to name. Anna had grown comfortable in the rhythm of the ranch. She moved with ease through the kitchen, the barn, the orchard. She laughed more often now, open, unguarded. Her voice carried through the house when she read stories aloud to the children at night. Her words wrapping around the walls like lullabies. One evening, as she read The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, the youngest girl lay curled against her, eyes half closed, while the boys listened with sleepy attention. Behind the half-open door, Jacob stood, arms crossed, leaning in the shadows, a faint smile on his face. He never entered, never interrupted, just listened, quiet and still as though afraid to break the spell. They began to speak more, not often but enough. A comment over coffee, a nod at the sunrise, a shared look when one of the boys said something ridiculous. He showed her how to mend a stirrup. She showed him how to make wild berry preserves. Then came the day Anna fell. The new colt had been restless. She insisted on riding him anyway, Jacob warned her gently. "He ain't ready," she smiled. "Neither am I." She wanted to prove something. She wasn't sure what or to whom. The colt reared on a hill slope and she hit the ground hard, breath knocked from her chest. Before she could even lift her head, Jacob was there. He had ridden like the wind, face-stricken, hands shaking as he dropped beside her. "Anna, I'm all right," she managed, though her ribs throbbed. He ignored her words. Gently, urgently, he lifted her in his arms, cradling her like she might vanish. "You scared the hell out of me," he muttered, his voice low, raw. She saw something in his eyes then, something unspoken, unpolished, and it stayed with her long after the bruises faded. But in Dry Creek, peace never lasted long. Murd got out. Of course it did. The banker's wife saw Anna shopping alone and whispered to the dressmaker. The butcher told the blacksmith. Soon everyone had an opinion. That girl's got her claws in Jacob Callahan. Bet she wants the deed, the land, the name. She's not a maid anymore. She's a snake in soft shoes. It came to a boil one evening in town. Jacob had taken the children for supplies. Anna came along, hesitant but smiling. They stopped at the saloon's general store window when the trouble began. Two ranchers, half drunk and loud, stepped outside the saloon. One pointed. "Ain't that the little Durr girl? The one who played damsel and landed herself a fortune?" The other snorted. "She's got more nerve than a coyote in a chicken coop walking around like she owns his name." Jacob turned slowly. "Careful, Callahan." One taunted. "You marry that, you'll wake up with nothing but an empty bed and an empty pocket." The street fell quiet. People watched from behind barrels, through shop windows, from porches. Anna froze beside the wagon, every muscle pulled tight. Jacob walked forward. "I do not take kindly to men speaking filth in front of my children," he said calmly. The first man laughed. "You think this town don't see what's going on?" Jacob stepped closer. "You don't speak her name again. Not unless you're prepared to answer for it." The second man opened his mouth to retort, but Jacob's fist moved faster. One punch, the man hit the ground hard, groaning. Jacob stood tall, shoulders squared, breathing steady. "She's under my roof," he said loud enough for all to hear. "She works harder than half the men in this town and has more honor than either of you will ever know. You say another word, and it'll be the last one you spit." The silence that followed was thunderous. Anna stood stunned, not at the defense, but the fire in it. Not just protection, not just duty, something deeper. Later, on the wagon ride home, the children chattered nervously, still riding the thrill of the moment. Anna sat quiet beside Jacob, heart pounding. "You did not have to," she began. "I did," he said. "And I would again." Their eyes met, and though nothing else was said, something bloomed in the space between them. Not quite spoken, not quite hidden, but unmistakably real. Spring gave way to the heat of early summer. The hills dried, the winds turned harsher, but within the walls of the Callahan Ranch things had settled into a fragile kind of peace until a stranger rode into town. He arrived with a crooked grin and a limp in his left leg. Wore a black hat and smelled of old whiskey and sour dust. Folks said his name was Clay Mercer. Said he used to ride with gamblers down in Colorado. Said he once put a bullet in a man over a horse he never paid for. But what Anna knew, what she remembered, was the sound of his voice. He had visited her father many times when she was a child, always at night, always leaving angry, and now he was back. She first saw him in town, leaning against the fence outside the general store, hat tipped low. He tipped it higher when she passed, revealing agrin that made her stomach turn. "Well now," he drawled. "Ain't you a little flower bloomed in fine soil?" Anna's steps slowed, chest tightening. "The you look just like your daddy, girl, especially when he lied through his teeth." She said nothing, just walked on faster, the weight of old fear pressing down. Back at the ranch, she said little, but her silence was loud. Jacob noticed. He always did. That night, she sat outside watching the stars. "He's back," she said when Jacob came to stand beside her. "Clay Mercer, he used to deal with my father. Claimed PO'd him. Claimed we stole from him." Jacob's jaw tensed. "You think he's here for you?" Anna nodded. "I feel like I brought a ghost to your door." He looked at her, voice low. "You didn't bring this." He followed. Days passed and tension clung like dust. Then came the letter, anonymous, but written in rough scrawl. "He ain't clean. Her daddy stole from me, and now I'll take what I'm owed." Jacob read it, then went quiet for a long time. The next morning, he rode into town, spoke to the banker, dug into old records. When he came back, he tossed a stack of documents on the kitchen table. That debt, he said, the one that got you tied to a fence. It was never real. Hollis faked part of it. Mercer fed it to him, and a stared breath caught. So while you were never the burden, Jacob said, they made you one. That night the fire came. It started in the grain barn. Flames licked the sky like angry tongues. The smell of smoke pulled Anna from sleep. She ran outside barefoot, heart pounding. "The livestock!" she shouted, realizing the animals in the adjacent pen were panicked, trapped. The blaze crept closer. Jacob wasn't back yet. She grabbed a bucket, threw water at the hinges, then climbed the fence and slipped inside the enclosure. The fire roared behind her, close enough to feel the heat against her back. She slapped the sides of the stairs, unlatched gates, shouted until her voice cracked. The animals surged out one after another, but the smoke thickened. Her legs weakened, her vision swam. Then arms, strong, familiar, swept her up from the dirt. Jacob, he carried her out, shielded her body as another support beam collapsed behind them. They fell to the ground in the open field, coughing, gasping. Safe. He cradled her again like he had that day by the coral. "You could have died," he whispered. "I thought they would," she said, voice. "I could not let them burn." The fire behind them raged, devouring the barn, but the cattle were safe. The family was safe. Later, as the embers cooled and the ranch hands assessed the damage, Jacob stood in the yard, eyes fixed on the ruin. Anna Kometo stand beside him. Her face was stray with soot, her hands blistered. He didn't speak. He just reached for her hand, and this time she did not pull away. The fire was out, but its scent lingered in the soil, in the fibers of every quilt and shirt that had hung too close to the barn. For days the ranch pulsed with repair, wood hammered, cattle counted, ash swept away. But that night, with the sky clear again, and the air cool enough to carry breath, the world slowed. Jacob found her sitting on the old bench near the fence line where the fire hadn't touched. The lantern beside her glowed faintly. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose, curling at the ends from heat and sweat. Her hands were wrapped in cloth. He sat beside her, close enough to feel the quiet between them. They did not speak at first. She broke the silence. "You could have died coming for me. You could have died going in for them," he replied. She looked at him. "I could not let them burn. They are part of this place." "So are you," he said. Her breath hitched. "I am still not sure what I am here," she whispered. "Not exactly a guest. Not quite family. People still look at me like I do not belong." He turned to face her fully now. "I do not care how they look at you." This house was silent for years. Since Sarah died, it was just duty and dust. You brought color back, laughter, life. Hatred to speak, but he held her gaze. "You are not a burden, Anna," he said, voice rough around the edges. "You are the reason this home remembers what joy feels like." Tears welled in her eyes, sudden and full. She shook her head slightly, as if trying to refuse the kindness. "I am afraid," she confessed. "Afraid that I will bring more trouble, that I will ruin something steady, something good." Jacob reached for her hand, bandaged, bruised, trembling. "You are not ruin, you are redemption." Her lips parted, breath shaky. Their faces were inches apart now, the night pressing in around them like a secret. "I do not know how to do this," she said. "Neither do I," he murmured. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, giving her time to pull away. But she did not. Their lips met with a tenderness that came from every moment they had held back. Every glance, every silence, every storm weathered together. It was a kiss not of possession, but of permission or healing, off-hunger laced with restraint. When they finally parted, her forehead rested against his breath mingling in the cool night. "I do not want to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "Then do not be," he replied. "You are home now." It began with smoke on the horizon, a thin, crooked line rising from the northern ridge, the side Jacob always called the blind spot, the side with no fence, no patrol. Jacob stood on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes narrowed. Anna came up behind him. "Is it fire again?" "No," he said. "It is men." Clay Mercer had returned, but not alone. This time he brought 5 others, rough-faced, leather-clad, with rifles slung over their backs and revenge burning in their eyes. They rode toward the ranch with dust in their wake and hunger in their hearts, not just for coin, but for land, pride, and power. "They think we're too few to fight back," Jacob said, loading his rifle. "We're not?" Anna asked, voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. He looked at her. "Really?" "Looked. We are enough." Within the hour, those loyal to Jacob had gathered. Tom Raleigh, the old ranch hand who had taught Jacob to ride. Cassie Bell, sharpshooting widow from the next valley. Even young Ben, fists clenched and eyes wide with defiance. Anna stood among them, a revolver holstered at her hip and fire in her chest. She had chosen this life, this land, these people, and she would not let them burn again. They took cover near the barn and bunkhouse, spreading across the property like nerves before a strike. Jacob crouched near the porch post, whispering to Anna, "They will not take what is ours." Gunshots rang out. The battle began. Mercer's gang fanned out quickly, using the tall grass and old barrels as cover. Bullets cracked through wood. Glass shattered. Horses screamed. Cassie dropped the first man, one shot clean through the shoulder. Tom took another down with a rock to the skull, then wrestled his rifle away. Anna stayed near the children, keeping them low in the root cellar entrance. But when one of Mercer's men circled toward the sidey yard toward little Sarah, who had slipped out screaming, Anna ran, "Sarah! Down!" The man raised his rifle, and Anna threw herself forward, arms wide. A deafening crack pain seared through her side. She hit the ground. Sarah screamed, crawling to her. Jacob saw the flash of the shot, saw her fall. Something primal tore through him. He stood fully exposed, firing again and again. One bullet hit the man's chest. Another struck the final outlaw in the leg as he tried Torun. Mercer himself limped behind the last shed, wounded and breathing heavy. Jacob tackled him with the weight of fury and fear. Fists flew. Mercer struck hard, but Jacob struck harder. "You do not get to threaten my home," Jacob roared. He hit him once more, and Mercer went limp. The ranch fell still. Smoke rose from the side barn. The chicken coop was splintered. Several windows shattered. The fence half collapsed. But it was over. They had won. Jacob ran to where Anna lay, blood on her dress, arms curled around the little girl. Anna, look at me." Hearies fluttered. "She's okay. I made sure." He pressed his hands against the wound, desperate. "You should not have." "Yes, I should," she whispered, fingers brushing his. "She's ours." Jacob's breath caught. "Hers," he repeated, voice breaking. The others gathered slowly. Cassie knelt beside them, tore cloth from her sleeve. "She'll make it," she said. "It's not too deep." But Jacob's hands did not leave her. He held her as the sun began to rise, bathing the battered ranch in gold. The land was scarred. The barn was blackened. The air still smelled of gunpowder. But they were alive. And Anna. Anna had become more than just a woman he had saved. She was the one who'd saved them all. The days after the fight moved slow and tender. Ranch hands repaired fences. Smoke was cleared. New planks rose where the barn once burned. Wounds were stitched. And some scars stayed. Quiet, sacred reminders of what was nearly lost. Anna healed, wrapped in warmth she had never known before. Jacob refused to leave her side for the first week, sleeping in the chair by her bed, hat in his hands, eyes never straying far. The children tiptoed into the room with flowers and whispered stories, each one trying to make her smile. She did. One morning, Jacob knocked gently on the door. Something folded in his hand. She sat up slowly, the blanket still tucked around her. He stepped inside. "Quiet, I want to give you something," he said. She tilted her head, brow furrowed. "This is not about debt," he added, "or rescue or owing." He held out the folded parchment. Annan took it slowly. She opened it, her breath caught. It was the land deed to the Callahan Ranch. Her name had been added right below his. She looked up, stunned. I do not understand." Jacob knelt before her, eyes level with hers. "I never meant to change your life, but you changed mine. You made this place a home again. You saved my child. You stood in fire for us." He placed his hand gently over hers. "This land, it is more than dirt and fences. It is our story now, yours and mine if you want it." Her lips trembled. "Are you sure? I have never been more." He stood, but before he could say more, the door burst open. 3 pairs of small feet ran in, arms flying around Anna. "Mama!" Sarah cried first, hugging her waste bin, and Sam followed, half shy, half proud. "Mama, can we help with the new barn?" Anna blinked. Once, twice, tears came soft and whole. She wrapped her arms around them all, pulling them in, pressing her cheek to their hair. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Outside, the town buzzed with quiet talk. At the general store, the butcher muttered, "Jacob gave her the land." The banker's wife frowned. "She'll ruin it." But the school teacher, standing nearby, smiled. "I saw her pull a child from fire," she said. "If that's ruin, then maybe we need more of it." Bit by bit, the wind shifted. Popel looked longer, thought harder, and some nodded when she passed by with a basket of eggs or a child's hand in hers. The woman tied to a fence was now the woman who'd held a family together through smoke and storm. One dawn, Anna stepped out onto the porch, cradling a coffee mug in her hands. Jacob joined her, arms folded across his chest. The horizon blushed with early light, casting gold over the fields. The children raced through the grass, chasing shadows and dreams. She leaned into his shoulder. He kissed the top of her head. They said nothing. They did not need to. From the ashes of debt, fire, and judgment, something had risen. Not just survival, but something better. A home, a name, a love that no longer asked for permission to be real. And as the sun crowned the hills, Anna Whitlow, no longer a burden, stood beside the man who had once saved her and now belonged to her heart and soul. From a girl tied to a fence in shame to a woman standing tall in love and honor, Anna's journey reminds us that sometimes it takes the fire to forge a home. And sometimes Theonies we least expect to be saved are the ones who save us. If this story stirred your heart, made you hold your breath, or brought a tear to your eye, tap that hype button and let us know you were riding with us until the very end. And for more unforgettable tales of love, loss, and redemption on the American frontier, subscribe to Legends of the Wild West Stories, where Wild West missed but hearts didn't. Listen through one ear and tremble through the other. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, ride true and love brave.